Miss Pappas. Yeah. When you all tucked up in the day been long, and the news online going on and on, what's right and wrong, and it's something up. Now here comes a great kid you know you can trust. From the true who's who, to the news and cameras, to the fake politics and the propaganda. Get this kid screwed in, got a lot to say. Oh shit, it's about to be a long day. It's a long day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of LongDays. I am very excited to have a little chat episode today. We have a real journalist here, not like me. Although my Twitter bio does say journalist and scientist, I have to admit I'm a liar. I'm a liar, and there's no consequences for it. My pronouns are not hee-haw, but that's what I put on my profile, so it has to be right. We got an actual real journalist. We put her in an Uber. She thought she was going to get killed by the Russian mob on the way here. And then she came and she used the bathroom that has no mirror. But I gave her a nice glass of water at de Blasio's finest. I mean, are you used to this level of green room treatment to just walk into the first apartment I ever bought? I mean, would you ever think in this, you have to admit, before we start, because your book is incredible. Obviously, you got this clip going around that's gone viral. Is this not an indication, doing this podcast today, what kind of crazy world we're living in, where there kind of are no rules, that you took an Uber here, this is going out to a lot of people, believe it or not, and this is the scenery here. This is media now.
I have to say, I really feel like I made it. Sitting here, just with you and knowing that anything could happen. Yes,
anything could happen. When you, like I said, this is a comedian's podcast, so it starts wrong, so it can't go right. But I know when you were a little girl dreaming about being a journalist, you probably thought one day I'll be able to take an Uber to Bay Ridge and show up and go to a bathroom that the mirror fell out of. And when you flush it reminded me of public school where you got to hold it down with your foot. Anyway, our guest, how rude of me. We're having too much fun already. My guest today is Batya Ungar-Sargon. My first question, has Star Wars ever approached you and asked to use your name as a character in Star Wars?
So the best tweet I've ever read was somebody tweeted at somebody who was saying something about me and said, Batya Ungar-Sargon sounds like the last thing you hear before someone chops your head off with an axe. And I was like, he got it. He gets it.
It does sound like you're gargling blood, yeah.
It was more like, Batya Ungar-Sargon!
Yeah, that is the last thing they hear. The last thing you hear is, Allah Akbar! You hear Ali Akbar and they hear, Batya Ungar-Sargon. Your name does sound Dothraki.
Yes.
Now, let's get to the bottom of it. What is your name? Ethnically speaking.
Ethnically speaking.
Which is very important. I need to know, before we start, whether I am empowering.
Who you can make fun of, right?
Yeah, yes. And who I'm empowering here. Okay? If you're just a plain old, Caucasian woman, I don't feel like I would have stopped this interview now.
Door.
Yeah, and I'd like to have someone come in and replace you because you're encroaching on a space that could be occupied by somebody who deserves it.
I totally hear that. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
Yannis is an interesting name as well.
Yes.
Are you related to Yanni? Are those closely related?
Technically,
names,
I think we're related if you go back far enough because we're both Greek. But I don't think we're specifically related. I also have some Turk in me.
Nice.
Probably product of rape during the Ottoman Empire.
That's nice.
Yeah, because my dad was from a little island called Imbros, which is now Turkish. Uh-huh. And the Ottomans occupied Greece for 400 years. We were slaves to the Turks. So sometimes they get a little Islamophobic just because of our background. I'm like, wow, they conquered us for 400 years. And they're like, and then I'm hearing people like, you can't be scared of Turks. I'm like, yeah, but my grandfather was sent to Egypt because the local sultan there was raping young kids. True story.
No kidding.
True story, yeah. And he never saw his family again. So they sent him to Egypt,
What?
my grandfather. Yeah, this was during the Ottoman era.
What?
Yeah, and there was some sultan there who had a taste. He had a little bit of a Jared from Subway taste.
Oh my God.
Preference.
Wait, and your granddad was sent to protect
him. Because the Sultan was kind of because the Greeks that lived on Imbros, it was Ottoman occupied, And so a lot of them were displaced, a lot of them were raped, a lot of them were oppressed. But the local chief, I guess they call sultan, right, or whatever envoy, the Pontius Pilate of that era, whatever they do. They run that area.
Yeah.
He liked to take little boys. It was like a.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a true story. My dad told me, and so they sent him to Egypt
To protect the pedophile?
to protect the kid, to protect my grandfather, because the sultan was the pedophile.
Wow.
So his parents sent him away to Egypt, and they never saw him again.
This is like a biblical story.
Yeah, it is a little biblical.
Wait, so he just disappeared into Egypt and
Just went to Egypt at
Oh my
like
God.
9 or 10 years old, stayed with relatives, lived in Egypt. Then he made his way to the United States. And of course, you can guess what he did eventually as a Greek.
diner?
Yes! That is so stereotypical and racist of you.
I can't believe I said that
Batya
out loud.
Ungar-Sargon. Yeah, because
so
it's true.
embarrassed.
No, it's the passport for Greeks into America. That's how you do it. That's why Greeks were very worried about Trump's wall, because they're like, if they build a wall, we're going to build an underground tunnel underneath that wall where Mexicans can traverse freely. As no way they taken our workers from. So yeah, my grandfather started as a busboy, waiter. Then
So your dad never met his grandparents?
my dad never met his grandparents.
Why?
And because they lived in Imbros and that was it. They never went back. And
Why?
I don't know. I guess once they got here, they were just they never went back. My granduncle came, and he joined my grandfather's older brother came, and they opened up a restaurant. At one point, they had the biggest diner in New York City. Down in they had one in Red Hook, where they used to get extorted by Albert Anastasia's brother,
No
which my
kidding.
father described as not extortion back then. He's like, back then everything was cash. This will lead us to this book, because I believe your book is called. I love this, because if you don't know me that well. I've been talking about this shit for so much. The media, there's no consequences. They dox with impunity. They can write anything with impunity. There's no consequence. They
No
just go whoopsie. They put a retraction. Your reputation is ruined. And I'll give you an example of something that happened recently. But it's called Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy. It's absolutely crushing it on Amazon. I went and it has 10,000 reviews already. You were on CNN being interviewed by, I guess his name's Brian Laundrie. I don't know his name. He's a bald guy. And you gave this beautiful description that's kind of going viral on Twitter. I saw that and I was like, I just reached out and I was like, I got to get you on. But my point is, to lead us to that, is my dad, context is gone. Everyone kind of thinks like a child now, where there's good guys and bad guys. It's very cartoonish. And people don't think like adults. And I think that's because of the amenities of modernity. We have such a comfortable life right now that people are still living like children. You go to the north and they're like, call me they. And you're like, okay, I'll play that game. I see only one of you, but I'll play. And then you go down south and you're like, Hillary Clinton's a salamander. You're like, I like that game a little bit more. I'll play that game. Everyone's living in a childlike game that they would create with their kids. And the example I was about to give is my dad said, look, back then, everything was in cash. The mafia was kind of fulfilling a void in the marketplace. In order for your restaurant not to get robbed constantly and stuff like that, you hired you couldn't count on the police to just show up. You didn't have a cell phone to call them right away. So if a place knew that your restaurant was Albert Anastasia's, nobody else fucked with it. And it wasn't seen so much as extortion as sort of a necessary expense to protect you in the kind of...
the mob should hire you
as
do
a
their
PR rep. It's not so bad, the shakedown.
Really compelling.
Look, when John Gotti was around, neighborhood was kind of, there was some pros. Obviously, it is extortion, but you can tell how they were more necessary back then. I wouldn't just put, Giuliani's not just the savior. It's they became antiquated, the mob, a little bit, right? You couldn't really just shake down. But back then, they were really needed.
Wouldn't you say that
Which is what your book's really about, is that bad guys are good.
Wouldn't you say that the difference between them providing a service that one was happy to pay for and them being mobsters and extortionists would have to, you could only judge that if you decided to stop paying?
Right.
It's kind of, it's not really a question of...
You can't really say, hey, can we re-examine the contract?
Exactly.
You were right. Technically, it's extortion with criminals. Technically. You couldn't just go, hey, Albert Anastasia, you know what? I hooked up with the Armenian mob, and they're giving me a better deal. Can we re-examine this? Can we talk to our lawyers about this contract?
That's what I'm saying. It's
Yes.
wait, but let me ask you something.
But I'm just saying, in that context, you can see how it flourishes.
Your dad
more.
didn't mind doing it.
My granddad kind of, he saw it as a necessary
Right,
evil. Necessary evil is what I'm saying.
Because they couldn't get the protection.
Couldn't get the protection.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not good. But you see that now with history and things like that. People going, Abraham Lincoln is bad. Because you look at some of the speeches against
Right.
Douglas, and he was trying to, he didn't want the expansion of slavery, but he wasn't morally opposed. You're like, okay, you're living kind of in a fantasy. You're kind of judging something with today's context about that era's context. First of all, he's a politician. So let's just put the context of the era aside, and let's just say he's trying to get elected. So he can't just go up there and John Brown it and be like, I'm going to kill slave owners. You know, he has to kind of
Right.
dance around. Like we read other stuff, you know.
Compromise, yeah.
Yeah, you read other stuff, you're like, oh, he
Yeah.
really was opposed. I mean, he did end slavery. So it's like, you know.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
So
yes.
my book is very much about, well, there's like a lot of history of American journalism, but then there's a lot of focus in the second half on like what happened recently, which I'm sure we'll get to. But do you remember when you first noticed like the woke culture starting to percolate, starting to take over? Like, what was that like? What were the first times you noticed it, and what did you make of it? And did you know immediately that it was crazy crap, or did you like come to that over time?
You're asking the right person, because as comedians, we felt it initially because we travel. Just like we kind of knew Trump was going to win because we travel, and people were like laughing, and we're going, I'm telling you, man, you go around, like he's more popular than you think. I started to feel it around 2012-ish, 11, 12-ish. And I actually had a character, which is behind you, named Marisa. That's it. My name is Marisa. Take me to Westchester. She's a trans Latin woman. And it got extremely popular with Latins. And I would sell out and I would do her. And it got popular with gays and Latins and women. And the funny thing is, I'm none of those things. So I'm an interesting person to ask because, like, I kind of got grandfathered in. Like, this came with next to no controversy, right? Whereas if I did that today, I mean, it would be, I could be taken by AOC's human rights SS. They could come and get me and throw me in a re-education camp. But that character was beloved by the people. So it's almost like I'm bulletproof. Like if some, you know, like you would call elite woke person tried to wave their finger at me, wave their finger at me on behalf of the people that they would think would be offended. There's actually like a 10-year history of proof that those people actually love that character, because this was created in 2010. I noticed in 2012, I went to start working at Fusion, which was a network. I had a show with two journalists. They were real journalists, and I was like the comedian. They just opened the cage, and I came out, and I was like, ooh, ah, 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 ooh, ooh, ah. And, you know, I was the comedic relief. That's what I get hired to do. And Fusion was kind of a little wokish. So I started to notice that was the beginning of the media starting to push that a little bit. And then in comedy, that's when you started to feel it a little bit. Comedians started to turn on each other, call each other out for jokes, and started to notice that, oh, you can get a platform by pointing the finger at somebody else and trying to take away their platform.
So you see it as like a cynical, like climbing the ladder
in
ploy?
In part. I see it as it's multifaceted in my opinion. What I see wokeness as is I think the independent variable, the most important variable to it is the modernity. You know, we're coddled. We have phones. Like, you know, it's the irony, like the freer you are, the more you complain because you are free to complain. That's the irony of it. You know, there's nobody complaining about the gender gap in China. I'll tell you that right now. So you're not allowed, right? So the gender pay gap. So we're coddled. So we're living as children and stuff. And then the internet is also a factor where everything's documented. But the independent variable, the most important variable to me, is we have a surplus of liberal arts majors who don't really have, like, you major in history, you major in English, you major in anthropology, you major in sociology, you come out, you don't want to work a real job, right? The internet's there to make your mark, to start your blog or your YouTube channel or whatever, but you don't have the talent per se as a comedian or a real journalist. You know, when I was growing up, journalists went in the field. Like, I made a joke on my podcast. I was like, I don't want to hear anything from you unless I see you in a vest that says press and you're risking your life. Now you have these journalists just like sitting there Googling stuff and like doing these fourth account, you know, lazy journalism because the internet provides. It's like a library right there. And there's no consequences for what they write. Nobody's really checking up on them. And they also didn't adapt to the digital age. Whereas, you know, at the beginning, maybe they should have did the subscription model at the beginning, but they didn't. They went with the ad model.
Right.
So they started doing these clicks. And of course, fictionalized clicks. I call them like car crashes. They've turned into car crashes where they get like everyone slows down to see a car crash. You see the headline, you're going like, I got to look at it and then I got to click so they can get their click-through rate. And so these are all factors, but the independent factor to me is that we're getting our ass kicked by the East. You know, China's kicking our ass. They're all majoring in STEM. You know, if they make a mistake, they hit them over the hand with a ruler. You know, you can look at the immigrants coming and kicking our ass. I remember doing a show at Carnegie Mellon. There was nobody that spoke English there. It was all South Asian and Asian. Culturally, we've become like the end of the Roman Empire, lazy, content consumers. We're just fat guys on the couch while I'm watching football going, can you believe he just did that? You know, it's like Cheetos all over. And people are taking the easy, spoiled way out. History major, you know. English major, like the STEM, the science, the math, it's just going down. And so you have this surplus of just like uselessly educated liberal arts majors that created this market to give themselves a raison d'etre. It's almost like they created this, they created this reality in order so they can have a purpose. It's like, I am an activist. And you're like, how do you make your money? And you're like,
No, but the sad thing is that our economy works so well for people in knowledge industry jobs and so badly for the working class. Like that's the thing that's so upsetting about it is you're totally right. It's like they've created an economy that works really, really well for them. So I talk a lot in the book about how journalism used to be this working class trade. Just like you said, you were out in the field, you know, you made maybe a little bit more than your neighbor, the cop, you know, like you didn't live in these like extremely expensive cities, you know, like where only very, very liberal woke people live, where you're writing only for each other, you know, but like there was this like total status revolution over the course of the 20th century to where now journalists are in the top 10% and they only write for each other and to each other in this like bubble, but it's like they make so much money doing it. And I think that's the thing that's like so offensive about it is like they sit there in this bubble creating these new like ethical categories, right? Ethical crimes in order to completely further silence the people who have lost at the economy that's rewarding them, you know, like all the people who are like downwardly mobile and like what used to be the middle class, the working class, like all these deaths of despair. Like you go on CNN every day and you'll find somebody sneering at like the very people who are committing suicide because there's no future in this country for them. Right. It's so, so sick.
And that's what's so great about your book is because always follow the money. Underneath everything, the quote by James Carville is very true. It's the economy, stupid. People want to survive. They want simple things. They want a job. They want to feed their families. And yeah, I saw it as a comedian, and I saw it as a comedian happen. What you're saying is like the alt scene came around. It was called like the alt comedy scene, and it was like the early 2000s, around 2010, 11, 12, 13. Now it's gone. But it was people who moved from the suburbs after they graduated college. They didn't go to the clubs. They created their own sort of comedy rooms in these gentrified neighborhoods. And like you were saying, it was very masturbatory. It was like a lot of people in the audience wanted to be comedians. And they kind of performed and audienced for each other. And it was the same neighborhoods where a lot of these Comedy Central execs lived. And then you'd go to these shows and like nothing was funny. They had this cadence and it was like, because, you know, you have to have pain to be funny. You got to, you know, people who have a good life need comedy the least. That's why Miami is such a horrible market for comedy.
That is so smart, what you just said. No, like that is so
Thank you.
deep.
Thank you.
I'm serious. Like that's
Appreciate it.
I never thought of that
Yeah.
before. Is that why like our class is so humorless? Like
Yes.
because
They're privileged. They're coddled.
oh my god.
They're
That's so
skillless.
brilliant.
They're talentless.
Whoa.
They haven't suffered in a trade
Oh my
or a
God.
skill, you know. And those rooms,
That's so smart.
much like what you're saying, those rooms kind of promoted that because they knew that they were giving themselves a raison d'etre. They were giving themselves a need. It was like, and if you came in and be funny, you came in and were funny, they were like, you're a racist. You're like, yeah, comedy is supposed to say,
Yeah.
comedy is the inappropriate thing,
Right.
said with charisma.
Right.
You know, it's like, nobody got kicked out of class by saying the right thing.
Right.
Going up and going, hey guys, racism's bad is not
Right.
funny. Me going up and say, hey, let me tell you why racism's good. That could be funny, you know? That's what comedy is about, is taking something inappropriate and trying to get you to laugh, you know? So I've been a class clown my whole life, and I tell you, yeah, I was never, the teacher never said, you're such a good person. That's not why I was funny. It was because I said the wrong thing at the wrong time, and you know, I did it with charisma. And so if you came into those spaces, in those alt rooms, that were, you'd go and you listen, and it's like these speeches, and people aren't really laughing. There's a lot of claps, and it was just like it was soulless because it was a bunch of privileged kids who came here, who don't want to work real jobs, don't have any real skills, aren't really that funny, were pretty smart in school, you know, middle class, suburban. And they were like, I'm not gonna go work. First of all, there's no factory for me to work at. I don't want to work at the bank. I don't want to do this. I want to my parents are paying my rent for a while, so I'm going to be a comedian. And that was their cadence too. You remember their cadence, Jason? I'm going to be a comedian. They had this like snarky, you just want to smash their fucking you know, they had this smirky, snarky kind of cadence. And then they would always talk about diversity and preach, and then you look at the audience and be like, this looks like Madison Square Garden in the 30s. This looks like the Nazi rally. It is as white as fucking white can be in here. And it was mostly white. Yeah. And it was like if they tried to do that comedy in front of a working class black audience or Hispanic audience or any immigrant audience or working class audience of middle American Caucasians, everyone would just look at them like, what the fuck are you talking about?
That's not
it was
funny.
only it was very specific. And so that when you said that about journalists living in those neighborhoods and performing, they're writing for each other, that's exactly what happened in the comedy community.
Man, that's
in that
depressing.
era.
Well, but it's over, or it's still
over,
exists?
man.
It's over.
It's kind of over.
So comedians are coming out of woke. They're kind of like.
It's very interesting.
Oh,
so
exciting.
Yeah, so there's a certain few that are like picked by the industry and pushed, and you have to be super woke. You have to be super woke and have some sort of story that they say hasn't been heard yet, and that's all identity based.
Right.
It's all identity based. This is not hyperbole. This is like a known thing. You can just look at what's being put on now. It's identity first, very much. And so there's a small section of those who get paid by the industry, but those shows almost always, maybe always, just don't do numbers. Like nobody cares. They make no money. The internet and podcasts has created sort of a place for comedians who want to be edgy, want to be a little more funny, to go directly to fans. And be honest with you, those people now are making a lot more money in a lot of cases than the people who were plucked by the industry. I mean, a lot more money. And you can see it on their Patreons. I have a friend who's making like a couple $1 million a year on his Patreon.
Wow.
And then you have advertisers on your podcast. You have so the internet. It's a split. Comedians have gone split. We look at them and call them woke. They look at us and they call us alt-right media. It's very funny and childlike. There was an article that came out where a journalist, I like to call, he was covering the local comedy beat. So that's kind of like the open mic scene for journalism, going into comedy clubs. I mean, he's an open micer journalist. But he wrote an article in the New Republic. He accused the owner of the Stand Comedy Club as being this racist on this message board. He wrote the article. New Republic published it. the owner of the stand was like, hey, this isn't me. I'm going to sue if you publish this. They published it. They went ahead. Turns out...
Wait, it literally wasn't him on the
wasn't
message
him.
board?
Turns out it was some kid trolling and pretending to be him.
Oh, my God.
And then he came out and he showed all the emails and everything.
Oh
So
my
this is
God.
after this guy's been called a Nazi, hurt his business, and by this time, everyone in the comedy industry's probably read this article by the New Republic. Now it turns out that it's not true at all. So they put a little retraction at the bottom, but the owner of the stand is suing and saying, I want you to take down the whole article. So now they're right now in the midst of like, are we taking down the whole article, writing a new one? So he has a list of demands, but his lawyer's saying, sue. This is liable. So right now that's what it is. But the fact is that it came out that none of it was true. And this is the New Republic. This isn't newsmax.org.
Right.
The New Republic used to mean something. Yeah. Like a lot of these outlets, I remember when I saw the New York Times when they tweeted, Rachel Levine is the first female admiral of the health. You're going, okay. Can this at least be a discussion? Can you support this kind of stuff with, because if you don't support it and submit to it 100%, you're put in a Nazi category or like alt-right. There's like these childlike groups they throw you in when you're going like, she may be the first trans woman, but that is, then it becomes semantic. Like, what are we calling what now? Is she a person with the womb? I know that's a big popular one is like, you're a person with a womb and she's a woman, which I love because you've been demoted and you get it because you wrote a book about it. So
it's like you have to ask yourself, like, what percentage of Americans are represented by the view that it's accurate to call a trans woman female, right? What percentage do you think it is? Like best case scenario, right? A new Pew study came out today, found that only 6% of Americans identify as progressive. Okay.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Is that a good, so 6% a good number, do we think that people calling themselves moderate Democrats would consider female to be the right word for somebody who identifies as a trans woman?
Right.
Probably not, right? So we're talking about 6%. So it's just very telling that the media is now being produced for 6% of Americans.
Right.
Like, who benefits from that,
Right. They're not making any money off it, that's for sure. But let me ask you now, because I've been speaking too much, but I've enjoyed it. But when did you start noticing this
I'm a
wokeness?
former woke.
Me too. Yeah.
You are?
There's a lot of us, yeah. We're homeless.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at. So
I'm like, look, I believe in healthcare. I believe in take care of the elderly. I'm pro-choice. You can go down the list of the things I'm woke at. But then I'm like, can I just call a woman a woman? If it's, if she can make a baby, can I call her a girl? That's it.
But I would say that's not woke. Like, I don't think, for example, like advocating for an end to mass incarceration, that's not woke. Like, when Trump released 5,000 black men from prison with the First Step Act, he was not being woke. He was being a good American, But
you can't say that because all things Trump.
I know, you're not allowed to even admit that happened, but that did happen.
Yeah.
And it's not woke to advocate police reform. We really need police reform. Everybody knows that. In fact, even Republicans know that. It's like a really good time to be American. Like,
you don't think it's a good
everyone knows
idea to have social workers show up with clipboards and ask people what medications they're on?
Right, so that's exactly the point.
Because I did social work for 5 years, and that's all we did. I did it for 5 years. I was a social worker. And all you do is you show up and you go, what medications are you on? Okay, maybe we'll take some. It's like, so it's funny. Yeah.
Wait, so were you a funny social worker? Did you
I was
bring
a funny
your
social worker.
Did that like help? That must have helped so much.
It did. It does help.
Damn.
I was popular with the residents, but
my
it is
God.
you get burnt out
really
quick.
Hard. Yeah, really hard.
So you don't think social workers showing up for violent crimes is a good idea?
I think that's woke,
Yes.
Like, saying police officers should have some kind of accountability is not woke. It's woke to be like they shouldn't exist. And wokeness is very much an elite white liberal phenomenon, and it's they're literally lining their pockets with it. Now, I don't agree with you that it's sort of a cynical ploy. I really think that like they believe that this is how you bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. I think they really believe it.
Oh, I didn't say they were aware.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't say they were aware.
But I think it's really bad.
I think they were doing good, just like Hitler thought he was doing good.
Well, okay, that's not. We don't.
Welcome to a comedy show where
But the problem with them is the Hitler analogies.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Hitler's everywhere now. I love it. No, because the left sees Hitler everywhere and the right sees Hitler. Nazis have never been more popular. Everyone is a Nazi right now. So it's like, it's never been more popular. And I don't see them anywhere. Like, there's probably just like 3 dudes on meth with no teeth being like, Hitler has some good ideas. And you're like, okay, those are Nazis.
Well, no. So it's a really good example with, so the filibuster is now white supremacy, right? That's the thing. The Democrats are.
White supremacy is in everything.
Right. The thing is, they used the filibuster to kill Senator Tim Scott's police reform bill. And then 3 months later, they were calling it white supremacy. It's like there is a level of cynicism, I think, at the level of politicians in the media. But yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
Is it profitable? You said that because you just said quickly that it's an elite thing. They're running away. They're making money, performing for each other.
I think
Obviously, we know we saw the defund the police thing, critical race theory. It's not popular with a lot of left-leaning people too, and you can see in poor neighborhoods, defund the police is not popular in Harlem. They're going fund them more, and because these protesters go and say defund the police, and then they go back to Carroll Gardens and sleep pretty nice and feel good about themselves.
Yeah. 81% of Black Americans oppose defund the police.
Right. I would too. I mean, you need cops if there's crime. If you're, it's almost kind of racist in a cynical, unaware way to say defund the police. Like you're looking at Black people as a monolith, and you're thinking about things like there's good people and then there's criminals. A lot of good people in Black neighborhoods, are like, we want cops because I don't care if that guy's Black. He's a criminal. I'm not thinking about his race. It's like, I want to be safe from the criminal no matter what color they are. But woke, quote unquote woke people are going like, defund the cops, they speak in these generalities, disenfranchised neighborhoods and, systematic. And you're going like, have you went door to door and talked to these people? Most of the people there have jobs and they're good people. They're just not rich and they have to live in neighborhoods they can afford and they want to be fucking safe. They don't care about color and shit as much as you do because you're looking at things in theory and everything is beautiful in theory. It's like you're in this platonic realm where you're safe. It's like you're watching a movie. It's like you're sitting there watching a Michael Myers movie, judging, Monday morning quarterbacking. It's like you don't care. You don't live in that neighborhood. You're advocating on behalf of that neighborhood and then going back to a neighborhood where you don't have those issues. I remember I was talking to a cop and he said the profile that they did on a lot of those protesters the kids that were protesting, most of them are young. And he said the typical profile was white, upper middle class, suburban, who was disagree with their parents on politics.
That totally tracks. Yeah, those images of like young, 20-something, white 20-somethings.
Sorry, I'm going to throw a little tobacco in.
Do it.
Can't do it on CNN, but you can do it here. Want one? That was rude of me. Want a snooze?
I'm not familiar.
It's a Swedish snooze. They figured out a way, you Swedes, that you can put this in and you don't have to spit. So it's like gross, but not too gross.
Is that instead of smoking?
Instead of smoking, yeah.
So you quit smoking?
I quit smoking. I just love tobacco.
I quit smoking and I really regret it.
Do you?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's so fun.
It's so good.
And it's so cool.
After a coffee with a coffee?
With a coffee, after spicy food, with a glass of wine.
Yeah.
I really,
so good.
really, really regret it.
Write another book on how cigarettes are good. I mean, really, I'd take 50 years smoking, enjoying it, to 80 years. If I'm going to be like, have dementia or have those last 20 years are going to be uncomfortable, I would like to know. If 23andMe could tell you, like, look, you're going to be in a wheelchair for the last 20, I'm going to go buy a fucking pack of Marlboros tomorrow.
Wait, so you quit for health reasons or?
Health reasons, baby. It's not good for you.
Yeah,
Wife doesn't like it.
Yeah.
I believe the fake media, okay, trying to tell us cigarettes are bad. There's a link for cancer. There's no link. That's the fucking science industry trying to get funded. Fauci's behind it. Yao Ming's behind it. Okay, James Dolan. It's a whole conspiracy. Sesame Street's behind it. They're just trying to hurt free market companies. All right, anyway. So.
Yes.
We're having fun.
Yes.
But you started to see this pattern because because you were in those circles as a journalist?
Yeah, I was in those circles, but I would learn things and it would be like a glitch in the matrix, like. Right,
when you learn a fact, you'd be like, oh, that doesn't match up.
Yeah, it doesn't track,
Right. So you sort of had did you have a moment of conscious?
Like sleepening? There's like a great awoke.
Did you not go along? Do you have what they call integrity? Are you a rare, human with integrity?
No, definitely don't have any integrity.
Right. That you think you're being humble. That means you do have. So you saw, and this just wasn't adding up, because you could have just continued to go on and keep writing articles like, do you know how hard it is to make it as the journalist with a name like Batya Ungar-Sargon? Do you know how much discrimination I had to face against the patriarchy? Jordan Peterson is Hitler!
No, I mean, like, even the Me Too movement, right? Like, I don't understand how you can be a woman and act like things were the same before and after that. Like, that there's no, like, that was a reallocation of power. Like, it used to be that men in the workplace more or less decided how much flirting there was going to be between you and them. And now you decide. Like, now mostly, especially for women in my class, upper middle class and, white collar jobs. Obviously, there's still probably much more problems like in, working class jobs. But like the idea that now men aren't on the defensive and waiting for you to set the tone and the cues is just ridiculous. But there's been no shift in tone. There's been no like, oh, we have the power now. This is kind of cool. I wonder who I'm going to flirt with or who I'm not,
Right.
Oh no, I'll be a good girl today. Like whatever. It's like, there's no shift. It's like, as there's been a massive seismic shift in the culture, but that has not been reflected in the hysteria of the tone. Like things like that, but it really makes you think like, okay, well, somebody's like obviously benefiting from that at some point. I don't think women are doing it on purpose. I don't think they're purposely being like, oh, we're just going to keep the level of discourse at this level of hysteria, like, because that's how we keep this power. But, the failure to acknowledge improvements on race relations, on gender relations, the number one issue that the right has shifted on by almost 180 degrees, LGBTQ rights.
Right, gay marriage, it's not
to
even a
act
thing
like
anymore.
that hasn't happened, like
Right.
the left didn't win a humongous culture war, like, in 5 years, to act like there hasn't been insane shifts in like things like interracial marriage, the approach, how the right feels about that, just total skyrocketing of approval over the last 15 years. Like that just stopped making sense to me, but then there were other things that were like even more intense. Like, okay, you'll like this. Do you know that the Yale study from 2018 that found that there's differences in how white liberals and white conservatives talk to Black and Latino people? Have you read
I'm
this?
interested. No.
Okay, so, the bear in mind, of course, that the liberals think that all conservatives are racists, right?
Right.
So, but this Yale study found that white liberals, when they talk to Black and brown people,
right.
they dumb down their language.
Right.
They use fewer syllable words than when they talk to white people, and white conservatives don't.
Right.
And I remember reading this study and being like, that doesn't fit.
Right.
Because that's a racist thing to do.
Right.
But we say that they're the racist. And I would like, it's not like the scales fell from my eyes immediately, but I remember being like, that's uncomfortable. Like
Right. Uncomfortable truth.
that there's a sickness in a worldview that makes you behave that way and then makes you get high and drunk on your own virtue while you're being racist and demeaning. And,
Right.
and it was like, I had this glimmer of like, there's a lot of things on my side that are influenced by that exact impulse of like, don't use a 4-syllable word with this person.
Right.
They are going to be very embarrassed because they won't understand it because they have darker skin than you, like that. I was like, that
Condescending.
yes,
You
dehumanizing,
guys need help?
condescending,
Just,
yes.
Here's some money. I'm guilty here.
Yes.
Yeah, this will fix it. You guys, because you
Robbing
can't
them
do it
of
on your own.
autonomy. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
You can't do it on your own. No, we know that. I'm here to help you.
I'm here to help you. I've arrived.
Yeah,
I'm here.
arrived.
I'm here.
Yes, that's what's behind it. That is certainly what's behind it. So, this is extremely fascinating.
Is it?
Yeah, it is really fascinating. So, when did you decide to write this book and why?
Oh, well, this is not the book I wanted to write.
Interesting.
I wanted to write a book I was doing a lot of reporting in the South during the Trump era.
Mm-hmm.
And you, as a person who have traveled and made people laugh across the nation, will have known what I, as a New York City journalist, was shocked, I tell you, to find out, which is that there are really good people across this nation, and the divisions that we think are deep and real about racism and sexism and Islamophobia and transphobia, like that these things don't actually persist, in other places in America.
So what you're saying, everyone's living in bubble. Like the irony is the internet opened up communication with everybody, but everyone ironically kind of retreated more into their bubbles.
Because all the money for liberal outlets, they're all going for the same 6 million highly overeducated, liberal, college-educated elites. They're all going. That's where the money is. So the New York Times is making a lot of money right now.
Right. So contrary to what I'm saying, they do make a lot of money serving those coastal niches.
Yeah.
Do you think, obviously, like you said, not acknowledging the achievements that were made in the culture war by the left, which objectively have happened.
Objectively.
That's where the grifters come in when they continue. Do you think that's in part human nature? I remember this quote, I think it was by Caesar or maybe Cicero. Who knows? This isn't about accuracy, but the quote is very good, is that it's very hard for a person to know when to put down the sword and pick up the plow. Meaning, like, when you're you even saw that with the social movements in the 60s, the counterculture movements, like the hippies turned into the yippies, and then it got into, like, it was like they won a lot of those cultural wars, and then what do? Do you go get a job at Best Buy? Or do you continue to find other things to fight about because it's sort of addictive in that, Chris Hedges always said that fog of war is kind of addictive, like, you're a warrior. How do you put down that sword and just go, I won? You're almost looking for something else. Like, it was like, okay, we got gay marriage. And they're like, okay, but I'm not done. This feels too good. So now how about this? Call me they, motherfucker.
I'm trying to come up with like a female version of that analogy. And I think it would be like, if you're always like contouring your cheeks and then you go on a diet and you lose a whole bunch of weight, like at some point, when do you be like, I can put down the contouring brush, the cheekbones are there,
Right.
like I can give up.
Doesn't stop till you're throwing up your food.
I think my answer to that is no, and my evidence for it is that if that were the case, you would expect Black Americans to be much more pessimistic about race relations and much more extreme on what still needs to be done. And you would expect white Americans who are less impacted by it to be more optimistic and like, well, they never really knew what the problem was. And so they are, less. But you see the opposite in public polling. So, you see that around 2015, white liberals just started to become way more extreme on their pessimism about race relations in America and their insistence that racism is a huge and growing problem, whereas, Black and Latino Americans stayed kind of where they were, which was like, yeah, there's room to improve, there's still problems, but overall things are okay, and the white liberals kept adding things to the agenda, so then it became racist to oppose mass immigration, right? It became racist to believe that we should enforce the national border, right? They started adding things onto it.
Right.
And that's a shift that happened very recently. So I think it really isn't, it's not like all of these people who were like pulling for civil rights and then, just couldn't accept that like a lot of the fights had been won. And so they started finding new things. But it's more like it happened very recently that white affluent liberals started to obsess over race and racism.
Right.
And I think it's because it became very enormously in their economic interest to do so, because we have a huge class chasm in America. We have disgusting levels of income inequality. And so it became in their economic interest to focus on race as opposed to class, because that way they can continue to enjoy the fact that the economy is working so well for them.
So you're calling them grifters.
Well, I think it's unconscious. I think it's unconscious.
Well, I could just say it because I'm a comic. You're saying you bunch of fucking conscienceless grifters who are benefiting from this. So they kept going and they started saying things like, no person is illegal, which you're going like, okay, that's not what they're saying. They're saying they're here illegally. Are we really going to have a discussion about this? Should we not have a border? It starts to become things like this. And you're saying, quite aptly, I might add, that they're doing this because it's in their own economic interest to keep this narrative going, because it serves those other guilty, deluded people.
But also because they are the ones who need cheap domestic labor in their homes.
Yeah.
Right? They are the ones who want to go out to eat to a nice restaurant and not pay, $500. They're the ones who want like a gorgeous bottle of wine for $15, right? Who's benefiting from mass immigration? It's highly educated liberals living in the coasts, right?
Not the working class.
And who's paying for it? It's Black Americans.
I just got to tell you right now, if this was NPR or this was CNN or MSNBC, I know I look like Rachel Maddow when I shave my beard. I do. Okay? Or I also look like John Stamos if he was blind. If this was Rachel Maddow, I would say, you just sounded off some right-wing talking points.
Yeah, I love when they say that to me.
And they would say that.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have to admit that I've heard Ann Coulter say a few things similar. Then again, you can't say that because there's a lot of other stuff I've heard Ann Coulter say where I say, shut up, bitch. But, people can't do that anymore. People can't
pick and choose.
Yeah, because you just said, Ann Coulter has made that point that the people who are affected most by illegal immigration are working class people, not liberal elites, which has become their sort of dog whistle. But you're kind of saying conservatives are kind of right by that liberal.
I'm like, that's not being a conservative is not that's not a slur. That's only a bad word if you accept
to liberals.
If you accept their lane. I'm a socialist. You want to call me a conservative socialist? I don't care.
Right.
Like, that's not an insult to me. Or AOC's latest thing. Only old people use the word woke. Like, literally, that's your argument that it's not cool. Right. I'm not cool enough. I don't need to be cool. I don't need to be young.
Woke. Let's change it to tedious. How about tedious? Yeah, AOC.
But you know what I mean? Like, they try to smear you by calling you a conservative.
Yes.
You don't actually have to accept that that's an insult. I don't accept that that's insulting, Like,
Right.
It's like, I happen to not see myself as conservative, but, like, I'm not going to be offended by that, you know?
See me as you want. That shows that you have a strong, you're a Sigma. You're going like, you're like, I don't care what you think about me. I'm going to be who I believe. Because we live in the internet, do you think the internet, everyone's kind of become performative? Everyone has kind of created this sort of, this avatar, this veneer of perfection, this veneer of a happy life. It's always like we've become our own PR people. It's like Twitter is like our own, like, things are great. I'm a good person. How much of wokeness is performative, and is it the perfect grift? So it's two questions. Is it the perfect grift? So how much of it is performative because of this era we live in? The second is it the perfect grift because you can't really criticize someone when they're saying they want more justice? It's hard to criticize someone when they're saying there should be no racism. You can't really call them a grifter or a bad person because then you look like a bad person. So is it a perfect home for sociopaths? Because as we know, sociopaths don't show up and say, hey, I'm a sociopath. They show up like Ted Bundy and go, my arm hurts. And then you got your titties bitten off. So they don't announce like it's, Catholic priests, same thing. It's like, I'm here to help you. And then the next thing you know, you black out as a child in Catholic school. So did you get those two questions?
I did, yeah.
How much is performative because of the internet?
I want to give an example because I'm really curious what you think about this.
Okay.
Do you remember when AOC went to the Met Gala and she wore that dress?
How could I forget it?
How could you forget?
How could I forget it? And how could the media let me forget it?
Right, exactly.
That poor immigrant woman from Toronto who was dating a Brahmin, made that dress, and her company had tax evaded in almost every state. How can I forget how she helped that poor immigrant designer gain to platform her was such a beautiful, selfless thing on AOC's part. AOC, people say AOC, they see a beautiful woman who's kind of self-interested and a little bit of a utopian child. I see Mother Teresa. She is Jesus. Yes, I do remember.
Okay, so this is now I'm doubly curious what you're gonna make of this. Mm-hmm. So to me, like if she had done that, the dress said "tax the rich," right?
Yeah.
If she had done that before I wrote the book, I wouldn't have needed to write the book because it was such a perfect encapsulation of what I'm describing, which is, someone who has clearly reached elite status, in this very American dream way. Like,
what are you talking about? I hang out with AOC in her district all the time. She loves going to Jamaican restaurants. I see her all the time at some of the bachata clubs in the Bronx. She's not hanging out in her tests with her honka-donk boyfriend on the Lower East Side. That's not where she is.
Right.
She's in bachata clubs. She loves the nightlife in her district. I disagree. It's laughable how transparent it is, really.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Like the at the event of conspicuous consumption, hobnobbing with the celebs, you can only get there as a total celeb, once you're sort of inducted into that area. And then, but the slogan, like, tax the rich, acting like this is some courageous act when actually everyone there agrees, all the liberal elites are like, yes, just tell me how much to pay in taxes, right? They're so rich, they really don't care. It's like, you give them the tax rate, that no problem, right? Because they really won't feel it, right?
Right.
But acting like it's a revolutionary act to be telling these people exactly what they want to hear to assuage their guilt about being so rich, right? But then a video came out that she had filmed with Vogue while she was sort of preparing for the event. And it came out 2 days later in the midst of all of the pushback she was getting from both sides, right? Lefties like me were, the right, of course, they attack her no matter what she does.
Yeah.
But even people like on the left who were like, this was really like tone deaf, right?
Yeah. She was getting dragged. I'd say the
was
left
getting
was
dragged.
criticized. The
Yes.
right was criticizing, the left was dragging her.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So then the video came out in the midst of that. And so you got to see it really from her point of view before the event and before the pushback. And it was really heartbreaking because you could see that she really, really believed it. Like, she really believed that she was about to go into the lion's den with this message for the people, representing the people. And like, it really wasn't cynical at all. It was like, she was completely believing that this was a revolutionary act that was going to make America a better place, and that, she was going to platform this idea of taxing the rich, et cetera, et cetera. And to me, it's like really important to keep that in mind, like the look on her face of like total genuine belief that this event, this spectacle was somehow more than just a spectacle, that it was actually like some sort of like revolution that was going to help the working class and the poor.
Is that the naivete of youth? Is that what I'm talking about? Like, sort of like, college hasn't ended?
I don't think so. There's this philosopher, Yuval Levin, and he once said something I think is really smart. He was like, Washington would be a lot easier if everybody showed up and was like, heh, I'm going to get lots of power and money and keep it for myself. Mm-hmm. Instead, everybody shows up and is like, I am making the world a better place. And they really believe it. And that is sort of what makes it harder to sort of shift things and change people's minds and get through and govern and whatever.
Even Hillary Clinton, too? She showed up that way? I'd say she showed up, but she showed up to the wedding to her husband with that in mind. It's a long plan for her.
A long con. You gotta love a long con.
Yeah, it's a long. I think she showed up with good intentions to the meeting on how to crash JFK Jr.'s plane. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. I don't believe in the Clinton body count. But it is interesting.
I was at a party last night and somebody said to me, well, Hillary Clinton was behind COVID, right? And I was like, I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah. Where were you? At Joe Rogan's house? He's a friend of mine. I'm joking. It's a joke. Yeah. What kind of party was that?
No, it was just a random
Was
party.
it blue collar comedy tour?
No, it was a.
Because that's something. That was a random party around here, and somebody said Hillary Clinton was behind COVID.
Yeah, black man. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, they can get conspiratorial too.
I was like, tell me more. How'd she get the virus?
But don't you think it's more interesting? I like that when someone comes with a good, juicy conspiracy.
Me too. Yeah, I love it.
It's fun. Yeah, it's
good
fun.
Stuff.
And so, this is all very interesting. The book is about the media specifically.
Yes.
The media. Let's talk about the media. You're in the media. Somehow I've become in the media now because someone in the media. I see journalists with Twitter accounts trying to be seen more than they used to, like in the days of Seymour Hersh, that when you had Bob Woodward, things like that. They kind of, I'm sure it's human nature to enjoy the fame, the infamy, the notoriety, whatever. But now there's an actual platform where journalists want to be seen themselves. And some could argue from an outside perspective as much as the work. It's like let me be seen as much as the work.
Totally.
Has that contributed to
Totally.
the lack of integrity sometimes you see?
But it's so much
with the
worse
truth?
than that. So the New York Times in 2014 had a really bad year digitally. And the guy who's now the publisher was, A.G. Salzberger, he was put in charge of figuring out why. And one of the main things he said was, our reporters aren't out there pushing their stories. We need them to become social media stars so that people
Wow.
Yes, it was literally a directive from above. And now what you see happening is like those social media stars that he instructed his staff to become, they wield that power against him and force him to fire people when they get upset. It's so funny. It was literally baked into the current DNA of the New York Times.
So is that what is happening? It's sort of like
Totally.
journalists or activists now putting pressure on the power structures?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
we saw that, I guess, a microcosmic example of that would be the protests at Netflix. I think it was like 10 people who went, of course, you would never know that we were in a Cold War with China because Dave Chappelle put out a special. And then all the media had to rush to cover the 10 people who were protesting.
Right.
But is that happening everywhere where a few employees and they can use the cover of virtue and just extort,
Yep.
for lack of a better word, or to use an accurate word, to be honest with you, their superiors
Totally.
into action. So that is the anatomy of what's going on right now in media.
Yeah. But unlike with Dave Chappelle, who has, FU money and who's making so much money for Netflix that, his, the head of Netflix is like, I'm going to mealy mouth my way around this, but I'm not really going to, Dave Chappelle's going to win, right? Like,
And I think also it was probably in the contract with him specifically because he's no dummy.
no idiot.
He knew what he was
Yeah,
going to do.
yeah.
He took 4 specials. He really harped on it. He probably said, his lawyers probably said, hey, listen, no matter what the backlash, this is staying up. And they probably, because they wanted Dave Chappelle so bad, and the backlash hadn't been so bad, to who knows, to that point, or just because it was an icon like Dave Chappelle, that I was probably baked in.
Right.
It was probably, his hands were probably tied legally.
Interesting. Or you think he would have caved?
Oh, I think he might have caved. I think otherwise he might have caved. I mean, I don't think he's above. Is anyone above that? We've torn down.
It's about who the market is, right?
Right.
So the New York Times' market, the only people they want reading them are the people who want them to follow the directives of the Twitter mob, right? Because that's who they're for, is the people who get caught up in that. I think Netflix must have a bigger audience than just
Of course.
progressives,
They
right?
have the whole country.
Exactly. So would they really have...
That's what makes your book so good, and I haven't even read it because I can see what your premise is like. This is all about money. This is all about wokeness is a market that was created by people to
See, you're a
serve
smart
themselves.
guy. You're
Yes.
like picking that up just from what I'm saying, but that's
Yes.
literally,
And this is at the expense of
the entire working class of all races,
Right.
Black working class, Latino working class, obviously Asians because they're on the wrong side of the woke, just like us Jews, and of course the white working class.
So in a sentence, is wokeness hurting the people that it's purporting to help?
1,000%.
Right-wing talking point.
Is that? I wish it was. I keep trying to bring it to the right wingers. I'm like, guys,
I'm being sarcastic
please
because
take this.
it's not. It's truthful. This is all editorialized. Of course, it's not a science, but if anyone has any common sense, what you're saying is true. But I'm just being sarcastic, saying like on a lot of these networks who are guilty of what you're saying, that would be considered a right-wing talking point.
Yeah.
By you saying that would be considered a right-wing. So you're taking us back and saying, hey, folks, this is how we got here. These are elite people who are writing for other elite people and serving that market and completely ignoring the working class of all creeds.
Yeah, I'll give you another nice statistic. So in 2019, Pew asked Black Americans where they were getting their news. So 12% said that they had looked at the New York Times in the last week.
But a lot of them said Charlemagne the God.
No, well, he's super woke. He's
Yeah, he's
way
super
more woke than
Yeah.
the average.
He's very woke.
But 36% said Fox News, and that's because the difference
Interesting.
between Fox and CNN is not race and it's not politics, it's class. It's about whether they're picturing a viewer who is working class or a viewer who has a college degree. That's it.
Right.
That makes every single decision about what they're covering and how they're covering it.
How much of this is a consequence of what I was talking about at the beginning of this show? sort of all of our jobs have been exported. Corporations have set up shop in other places that don't have the labor laws we have here to pad their profits, have made deals with the devil in other countries.
I think the causality is the exact opposite. I think the liberal media abandoned the working class, which gave Bill Clinton the idea that he's allowed to ship their jobs to China, 5 million of those jobs to China, 5 million jobs to Mexico. Like that, the abandonment of the working class by the liberal media throughout the course of the 20th century as they became rich and moved away from working class Americans was what gave the Democrats the idea that they could just start ignoring these people who used to be their base. The Democrats used to be the party of labor.
Right. But didn't conservative, I mean, you can't, like, a lot of that is like, you know, private, like, that's a marriage between, albeit an unscrupulous one, between the private corporations and politicians to open up those trades, you know, Nixon going to China, formalizing those relations, sending our
totally.
So Republicans are guilty of that too, right?
But you expect it from them. They're supposed to be the party of the rich. I don't care what they do.
Right. Okay.
They were supposed. The
I just
Democrats
wanted to be clear.
Yeah, the countervailing force. But you know, it was Clinton who really normalized trade relations with China, who signed NAFTA into law. Right. It was just the death of manufacturing in America.
So is that what's behind this? If we continue to pull out, is what's behind this the economic abandonment of the working class for the greed of whoever you want to put in the elite class?
That's why I wrote this book, because it's so disgusting to be high on your own virtue when you have essentially dispossessed the entire working class of all races of America. In part, that's AOC's platform. If you look at her platform, every single plank in there is just it's Brahmin leftism. The Brahmins are the highest caste in Hinduism, the priestly caste. And there's a French economist, Thomas Piketty, who's described how the left in all of the developed world, Europe as well, what happened to the Democrats, which is essentially they went from being the party of labor to being the party of this Brahmin leftism, meaning the whole platform, it sounds like social justice, it smells like social justice, but it's actually lining the pockets of liberal elites at the expense of the working class who are paying for it. Mass immigration, okay? Banning fracking. The whole Green New Deal is a tax on the working classes that flatters the vanities of the elites. Defunding the police, you know, all of this stuff that's happening in education. It's just liberal elites are using the real pain of Black Americans to withdraw from the common good and line their own pockets, all while being convinced that they are the side of virtue. It's just crazy how that happened. And in the book, I argue that the media really sort of wrote the playbook for this, and the Democrats followed along. And now, you know, for giving $50,000 in student loans. Like, come on, you know, it's so naked. But if you're like, what are you doing? We're supposed to be the party of the working class, not the party of dentists. What are you talking about? You know, it's like, no, there's no ability to see it.
Is it conscious? Is it overall net? Is it conscious or unconscious?
No, it's unconscious.
It's unconscious.
Everyone thinks that they're doing good. Everyone thinks they're on the right side.
Right. So they fall into this pattern. The group. It's sort of, so it's bigger than them. It's not a choice per se by this elite liberal woke.
But they could choose not to. They could choose to see what's going on
if they become aware to it, like you did in some way.
It's like the way they treated, you know, Trump voters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they weren't aware that they were just projecting onto these people, you know, all sorts of, you know, racism, whatever, because they had the temerity, like the audacity to vote for somebody that the elites didn't, that offended the sensibilities of the elites. Like, right. They didn't realize they were doing that. They really saw them as this, like, racist, you know, monolithic threat that was coming to, like, they look at the, you know, 400 people who stormed the Capitol and are like, that's 72 million Trump voters. It's more than 400,
though, wasn't it?
Wasn't it 400?
Was it 400?
I thought it was 400.
Wow, that's close to the Spartan movie. It's only There's only 400 in them?
400. I thought there were 400 indictments.
That's not that. Yeah, probably. That's not that much. Yeah. Do you think that did the liberals? Is their blind spot that, you know, how the old expression that the Shakespearean expression, war makes for strange bedfellows? Did they not see that a lot of those people on the right were voting for Trump, not because they love Trump, but as sort of a rebuke of the national conversation being about a third bathroom?
But I think that's correct. I think that's the correct analysis. But no, they were in. If you said these people have economic anxiety because we, the Democratic side, shipped their jobs overseas. If you said that, they said that's a dog whistle. Now, economic anxiety is a dog whistle to cover for the real reason, which is their racism. And by the way, as somebody who spent a lot of time interviewing Trump voters, I haven't met a single one who didn't say to me, like, I really wish he would stop with the tweeting. It's really undignified. It's really undignified. There was one person who told me that, no, I like it. This black guy in Georgia. But and aside from him, hundreds and hundreds of people, every single one of them had a decent reason for voting for that guy, a respectable reason. And
I'll tell you who liked it, liberal media.
Oh, for sure. They got rich off of it. Literally.
SNL loved it. Colbert loved it. CNN loved it.
Totally.
They had,
the New York Times?
Yeah.
Do you know how many times Trump's name appeared in the New York Times in 2017?
You're about to tell me, is there like a fact?
I have the number.
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, 97,000 times, which is once every 250 words. Now, lest you think that's normal for a president, you know, so Obama's first year in office, how many times did his name appear? It was 37,000 times. Wow. 37 versus 97,000. I mean, they couldn't keep his name out of their mouth.
Right. And he knew it. He knew
it, yeah.
What is the solution? Is there one? Is it just an awakening? Is it too far gone? Does it have anything to do with the things being made overseas and it can't come back? How do we get off these fringes and get back to the way things used to be, where people didn't call each other Nazis all the time?
Well, I think the good news is most Americans are not falling for this crap. Like, this is not... The problem of polarization is very, very much an elite phenomenon because elites are making money off of it on both sides. So it's not. I don't believe that America has a problem of being polarized or divided. I think our elites do, our chattering class does, our political class does, because it's very much in their benefit to be so. So the problem, I think, is smaller than we think. And the solution, I'm religious, so I think the solution happens, in every person's heart, like stitching back together the fabric of American society, remembering that we're, brothers, we're sisters, like we're in this together, because the evidence is there that we're all in this together. The evidence is there that we all agree about the important values that this great nation was founded on. So it's really that, I think, it's getting offline. It's stopping addicted to the news and to this information that is like meaningless, like this, all of the negotiations with these two big bills. Who cares? They're gonna figure it out. They're gonna pass some version of it. They have to, yeah. They have to. Why is it every single day I have to know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are and who's the stymies and who's the this? And it's just, come on, like,
Right.
Yeah.
Has this affected you in your personal life with...
Yeah, I lost a lot of friends.
You've probably lost a lot of interest, like actually lost a lot of friends for having a different opinion.
Yeah. They denounce you on Twitter. Like, people you've helped, people you've known they can't help themselves. It's like this compulsion, it's horrible.
So they've kind of called you right-wing. You've been, as a pejorative.
A Nazi, a capo, an embarrassment to the Jewish people, it's horrible. A racist every single time,
Yeah, and let's talk about Virginia, because things seem to culminate in Virginia. A lot of people trying to figure out what happened.
What side are you on?
I am a comedian. That's what I always say. And that's why I get shit from everyone. Like, if you want to know me, it's like I take it to everyone. Okay. And I lose a lot of people. Like, one week they'll be with me, and then the next week
Totally.
Yeah, I don't think that Bill Gates sneaks into your asshole when you take the vaccine. So I've lost a lot of people saying that. I lose people all the time because I think I stand by my... principle, which is I'm not left, I'm not right, I'm a comedian. I mean, it's not my job to take a side. Why would I alienate one side? Or I want to make fun of... I like being a rascal. I like poking all the bears, which in this era, based on the way algorithms work now, has not been particularly advantageous towards, because you got to run with one and just say, hey, this is everyone's got a niche now.
So true.
But I just don't want to do that.
That's really admirable.
Well, I can't help it. It's because I had a human rights mother who was very difficult, and she still does things to me, so it's tough.
Wait, what do
she
you
didn't
mean?
care about me getting rich, but she made sure I fucking walked around Halloween with a fucking UNICEF coin thing collecting quarters
No kidding.
to buy fucking Christmas cards. Yeah.
Wait, so she was like a lefty?
My mother was a human rights lawyer. So my mother is Anna Mamlakis Pappas. She wrote a book. It's a seminal piece in the international rights of children called "The Law and Status of the Child," which is like,
my God.
if you Google, it's like quoted now as like international law. The problem with international law is culture. I don't know if we'll ever be able to agree.
We can't enforce it.
We can't enforce. It's unenforceable.
It's unenforceable.
And so.
But that's so. I'm sorry, just to get a little metaphoric
No,
here.
go.
But that's, to me, that's so interesting that your mother wrote this unenforceable law about protecting children. Like, there's something very poignant about that.
She headed up it was called UNITAR. It was a whole ad hoc project under the United Nations, I guess in the 80s, where a lot of international lawyers came together and tried to come up with some sort of cohesive, seminal common law on how we protect children. That was her passion. So on Halloween, she would send me with the little cardboard thing to go collect coins. We always got.
Wait, instead of candy?
Yeah, that was my thing. Yeah, it was abuse. It's abuse. And we would get our Christmas cards. Christmas cards were always UNICEF, and we had posters every wall in the house of all like these United Nations posters, and so that was her.
Wait. So as a kid, did you feel like, oh, there are all these children suffering, and I have it so good, and I should be grateful, or was it what was that like?
My mother was. I wouldn't say. Yeah, I don't look at her as like a. She was passionate about that. That was the one. There's a lot of positive. My mother grew up during Nazi-occupied Crete. She saw a lot of horrible things. She hated Germans. She hated Turks. So as progressive as she was, she couldn't get over those two things. Germans, that was it. It was just not. They're all Nazis, and Turks, just like she hated Turks. So it's like she was very Greek in that way. But people are three-dimensional. That's what I don't love about this modern cartoon type of. Thinking. It's like my mother was a complicated person. I became a comedian because of my mother. It wasn't all good. But the one thing my mother was very passionate about was the rights of children. And she was very passionate about justice. Sometimes so much, too much, because those are the people I don't fear like assholes. I'm like, I know who you are. I fear someone who's going, I got to salute. We're going to fix it all. We're going to, utopians scare me.
So, yeah, there's a lot of that on the left.
There's a lot of that. And my mother had a little bit of that, where it's like, in the adult world, it turns into hypocrisy. Because nobody's that good. Nobody's that good. And like I said, she hated Germans. She couldn't get past some of her own biases. She was very progressive, but then also, gay people she thought was unnatural. So it's complicated. She's a woman of her era as well. But she was very passionate about children, and she was the one who on the train, if there was like someone beating their kids, she turned into a lion. Wow! And my mother was small, and I would be there, and I'd be embarrassed. And I remember one time in particular, it was like a huge woman, but my mother turned into a lion to protect. This woman was hitting her kid. And my mom just went up and started screaming at her. And the woman cowered. Wow. And I was sitting there going like, I'm going to watch my mother get killed by someone who's a little tougher than my mom. But it didn't happen. And she did that a few times. My mother would those are the times she would turn into an absolute lion. Wow. Otherwise, she was like this small Cretan Greek girl. So
what an amazing memory to have.
Yeah, and I could tell you a whole bunch of other ones that aren't so amazing.
Is she still alive?
Yeah, she's kind of alive. Yeah. Say like she's on the runway. She's going to take off soon. She's got dementia. She's in her late 80s. I was the youngest of a lot, but it's adult conversation seems to. That's why I bring up utopians, because I do almost feel like I'm even on Twitter now. You'll see these people who've become thought leaders, and they're just saying like the most fundamental common sense things. I'm going like, how crazy is this era that just some run-of-the-mill professor, before he stood up and said, I think men can't get pregnant, is now a thought fucking leader? It's like the standard has dropped. I feel like I'm in a dormitory. Twitter's like a freshman dormitory where people are like posting these harangues, and they sound like college freshmen, because they don't have any experience with what they're talking about. They're judging, they're throwing things around, calling this person, saying our country has no freedom, or, it's just spoiled. It's like a private college.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of that utopian stuff. And is this the collapse of the American empire?
No.
No. Oh, I like some optimism.
Definitely not.
This isn't like the end of Rome.
No.
You see a future.
Yeah.
Is that just because of your faith, or is it your brain?
No,
Chaucer
I mean,
said, "Let the head guide the heart." What are we talking?
I think
What does your
people
head
are
say?
really sick of this.
So you think it will snap back?
You don't think we're turning a corner? I was on CNN talking about this stuff.
I've never heard someone say it. Let me give you credit. And that's why I was jumped. I was I would love to get her on a podcast. And when you said yes, I was like, you really didn't flinch. And you didn't flinch.
I was expecting him to be so much meaner.
Yeah, because I think he got a little intimidated.
By me?
I think he got a little intimidated because you don't come across as someone who has a grifting agenda. You were just you look like he didn't want to fuck with you. I felt like that's from an outside perspective, how you presented it and the way you when he tried to play devil's advocate, you had that energy. I'm glad you said that. Your energy was I'm glad you brought that up. Am I wrong, Jess? He follows you on Twitter. He knew about you. He knew how to pronounce your name before I did. Every time I go for it, I got to look at the book. Batya Ungar-Sargon. Is your husband Sargon? Is that why it's hyphenated?
No, he is not Sargon. That's my dad's mom.
Oh.
She was from India.
Very progressive. So you going with the matriarchal.
My dad did it.
Oh, your dad did it?
Yeah, I think to get back at his father.
So you're Jewish, Indian. What's your combo?
Well, she was Jewish too.
Yeah. From India.
Just all Jews, all the way back.
Nice.
Just a lot of from India,
Yeah.
Yeah.
My cousin-in-law is Israeli.
Is he?
Married my cousin. Yeah.
Is he? I like this. I like your.
I'm trying to represent everybody, and then we got the
I love
Allah.
it.
I love Allah mugs.
Are you religious?
No. No. I am Jesus though.
I suspected when I walked in
No,
here.
I'm not religious, but I do believe there's something more for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe
That's religion.
there's good forces, there's evil forces. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this is a simulation and aliens are having fun. I don't know if aliens are us in the future coming back and they don't want to mess it up like Back to the Future. There's a lot of questions.
Wait, do you think you have free will? I don't know if people have free will. I can't tell.
I do.
You do?
And that's because of a book, one book that I read, which I think is the Bible for normal people.
What's it called?
It is called, I have dementia. I do have the gene for it. Come on, Jess. You know what I'm talking about. Steinbeck.
Oh, East of Eden.
East of Eden.
East of Eden
by
I was
John
not
Steinbeck.
expecting that.
Yeah, East of Eden by John Steinbeck, which he considered to be his magnum opus, even though it was not one of his more commercially successful books. But if you read that book, it's based on Cain and Abel, and the moral of the book, the overarching moral of the book is, you're Jewish, so Timshel.
Yes.
The word Timshel.
Yes.
At the end of the day, no matter what your genetic predispositions are, no matter what, you do have choice. It's a choice. At the end, you can resist it. Mm-hmm. You can do it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'm trying to think of someone who lost a lot of weight when they were fat. How did that happen? That one actor from some movie who's now he's jacked. That's just a oversimplified example of it, but your disposition, genetically, you were supposed to be fat. You've had ancestors, whatever the reason is, but you can push. Gattaca, Rudy, yes,
push through.
That's what makes the hero stories.
Yeah,
is those people who resist.
Yeah,
a lot of times people stand up from the group. I love that one photo. There's this one
from the
photo.
Nazis.
How did you know?
I just knew. I love that photo too.
We are in sync. I hope we're going to get our periods together at the same time. We're in sync. That photo from history is so powerful. It's one guy just going I don't fucking buy this.
Yeah. I'm not sure about this.
One guy. And so that just shows you that it's possible. And that just shows you that, in my opinion, America is based on the best idea of inalienable rights and pursuit. Those things are the best. That's what separates us from the animals, to dream and try to achieve those dreams, and to free us from the sometimes burdened like anchorings of culture. Because sometimes culture is like, oh, this is my culture. It kind of stifles individuality. America, in that way, America's unique.
Yeah.
In that it's an experiment where all the, I mean, of course, other empires have had people from different races, religions together, and they lived in peace or whatever, doing their own thing. But America's really the only place that's ever existed that you can come here and be an individual. You can go like, hey, I'm gonna believe what I want to believe, and and like you're legally protected. So that's what makes America unique. I know Joe Rogan said it's like, this is the only place we've had democracy and freedom. I'm like, I think Europe's free. I'm not sure.
It's less free though.
It's well, depending on how you look at it. They're freer to get care if they get sick.
That's true.
They're free. Yeah, it depends.
That's true.
But in that way of like, there's no ceiling. Yeah, America's a feast or famine type of place. I wished we had healthcare. I wish we took care of people a little better. Things like that. But
by the way, a lot of Republicans do too, like voters, not
Yes.
the leadership. Like the leadership really doesn't represent them on that front.
Yes. And I sometimes have sympathy for politicians. I mean, let's talk like adults. Like, humans are the only species that have such a wide variation in intelligence. The diversity within our species is unlike any species. You have a lion, they're pretty much a lion. They come in a pecking order of more dominant or less dominant, but they're none of them, there's no lions having existentialist ennui.
True.
Nobody's just sitting there going like, but wait a second, why are we lions? Is there a God? What should we kill? Is it bad that I just fucking killed this hyena? Should we be cooperating? It's just all instinct. Whereas humans, there's just like, you have like genius level people, Tesla genius level people, Mozart, and then you got like barely sliding into human, just play at the plate, just got a finger in on the tag, like almost an ape. And you have everything in between. It's very hard to govern. And then you throw culture and belief and genetics in there. It's very hard to govern. So it is a challenge. Like, it is a challenge.
But I feel like we're living in a time of like a crisis of leadership where people won't stand up and do the unpopular thing. And so, for example, when Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, I thought that was amazing, like, because he got slaughtered on both sides. There was no difference between CNN and Fox News for those 2 weeks, and he didn't back down. And I was like, wow, that's so rare in American politics. Like you said, if you don't pick a side, you can't get that audience, that constituency. And it just, I don't know, do you agree with me that we're in a crisis of leadership?
We are in a crisis of leadership in that people are putting, I think, interest over principle always.
Yeah.
To me, it's like you can act in two ways. You can act under the principle of interest or in the interest of principle. The latter seems to be lacking.
Very poetic.
It seems like we're all whores now. I just look around and all I see is whores. No gender attached to that. I just see
but it's like nobody's enjoying it,
Nobody's
someone's
happy.
supposed to be enjoying it when there's a whore on the scene, and it's just there's not. Everyone's
that's
miserable.
the thing. People somehow we've all kind of bought into this kind of the only key to happiness is richness at all costs by all
fame,
or anything like that, and just people don't have any principles. Maybe that's a lack of religion or a breakdown of spirituality. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the inevitable sort of usurp the way that the American dream has usurped everything, and that's the thing that's marketed to us constantly. And maybe it's advertisers, buy this, buy this, buy this. Maybe marketing has taken over everything. Maybe it's the social media, the way they're engineered to, because let's be honest, the social media apps are set up for us to fight. It's like, hey, look at this person, likes, dislike. It's set up to make you envious. It's set up to make you jealous. It's set up to make you insecure because it benefits them. And they're doing that out of the principle of interest. So maybe that is the overarching thing, that we've lost all principles.
Yeah, a point I make in the book is that if you're online and you're like scrolling through social and you see something that enrages you, you know that feeling? It's like road rage. It's physical. You're like, I can't believe somebody thinks this on the internet, you know? Every time you feel that way, someone's making $1 million. Like literally. It's not normal to feel that way about a stranger. That's not natural. They've hacked that outrage button, you know? And every time you feel that way, you're literally allowing someone to take your heart and make $1 million off of making you hate some other American, you know, like randomly, for no reason. That's an
amazing thing you just said. I'm gonna let that hang because I don't think we can top that. Batya Ungar-Sargon. Did any marketer ever tell you, can we just go with Betty Stevens? But
never.
No, Batya Ungar-Sargon. So get used to that name. If there's one thing in the book beyond what you've already said about the liberal elite that I've heard you say on other shows, what will people get out of reading this book? It's a tough one without giving away the entire book.
Like, American journalism started as a populist revolution against elites on behalf of the working class. I spent a lot of time in the early chapters looking at these heroes of populist journalism who showed up at a time of massive, disgusting income inequality and were like, we're here to represent the poor. We're here to represent the working class. Like, there is an alternative. We don't actually have to hate each other. There are alternatives in our history. And you know, I guess that's really the message of the book is like, do not allow somebody to make you hate your fellow Americans so they can make money.
Boom. How woke media is undermining democracy. Go get this book. Everyone who watches this podcast has to get this book and check it out. I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to learn to read and then read it. It'll take a little bit, but it's a little bit of a protracted process. First, I got to learn to read, and then I will read it. Hats off to you, and I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic book. Thanks for coming on. Follow her on all social media. It's all just your name, right?
Yeah.
Batya Ungar-Sargon. You can't. There's not another one. I don't think there's another one. I don't think people are going to put that name in, and there'll be anything more that comes up to you. Are you the only person that has this name?
I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure. So, I'm destroying everything. The Greek helmet, Swedish snooze, New York Newsday, and of course, we got a pocket pussy. Who is this? Who was it again?
Ava Lovia.
Ava Lovia gave me that. She's a boy. I had her on as a guest.
Nice.
So it's a diverse It's a diverse set. And also Abe Lincoln, the racist. He hates everyone! Cancel him! Tear this statue down!
Oh my God.
Get the book!
It's been a long